I had a 69% win rate with the Mad Titan himself, Thanos. He has not felt so good in a very long time. Let's take a look at the nicest deck that I've played in a while. This is the Thanos list that I have been playing, and I realize that looking at it, I think a lot of people will take issue with me doing a Psylocke, Wiccan, Thanos list, giving all of the stuff that I've said about Psylocke and Wiccan. I'll be 100% honest. I basically never turned Wiccan on the entire time I played this deck. It happened maybe like 3 out of 30 games is what it felt like. It was just not a thing that was regularly happening. And so my experience of this deck is less as a deck that is a Psylocke Wiccan deck and more as a Thanos deck that is explicitly trying to curve out into dangerous Mockingbird stuff. That's really what this deck plays like more than anything else, is a decent curve out stats deck that has this like very cheap Mockingbird at the back end alongside, whatever giant big guy you feel like playing. You have not just the stones supporting this game plan, you of course have Cable and of course Kate Bishop as well, creating cards that can discount your Mockingbird. So I think I want to make it clear that when people look at this deck, what they should see is not a Wiccan deck. Frankly, Psylocke and Wiccan are like maybe the two worst cards in the deck, it feels like, although it's good enough to have them in there that you're just like fine with it. What you should see is a curve out Thanos deck, a deck that is looking to win on points and interaction in the classic style of Thanos. But now that there's no longer such incredibly overpowered things to be doing, like turn 4 Professor X, the deck is playing a little bit more fair. You're playing your 1-drop, you're playing your 2-drop, you're playing your 3-drop, you're curving out, then you're maybe going to be cheating some energy, either from Wiccan or from Mockingbird. However you want to handle that, that's typically how it ends up going. And the major upside of playing a deck like this, instead of playing Thanos Arishem, is that you're going to be able to get a lot of value out of your Mockingbird because you are much more reliably going to get to it when you have your good Thanos straws than they will. This is primarily, to me, a Mockingbird deck. She is like the big point of what you're doing here. She is the payoff here. One of the other things that I'm doing that other people are typically not doing in this shell is playing that additional 1-drop in the form of Hydra Bob. My thought process is basically, look, if we're going to play this Psylocke Wiccan stuff, our curve cannot start at 2. I do not want to be locked into having to play only the stones. I want to have an additional 1-drop in there. This gives us 7 1-drops in the deck, because one of the easiest ways to blow the Wiccan is to just not have a 1-drop to play. And those games are already pretty bad for you, but I don't like having Wiccan in here if I'm going to be blowing that 1-drop play like a decent amount of the time. And I think you are a lot. This also is a card that lets you save those reality stones a decent amount of the time. Like, let's say you're opening on reality stone. You're pretty incentivized to, if you are a Wiccan deck, just play that reality stone, which flat out sucks. And I don't want to incentivize myself to do that, so I have a Hydra Bob in there as well. Again, the main thing that you're going to want to grasp in terms of playing this deck is that it's about Mockingbird and stones and not so much about the Wiccan stuff. The Wiccan stuff is mostly there to facilitate your absolutely most broken draws, which are stuff that involves like playing Gore and Thanos. But really what this deck likes doing is curving itself out, getting a time stone down early, Thanosing on 5, and then later in the game you have like this turn 6 of like the rest of the stones plus a Mockingbird, gives Thanos the 10 power, makes it so he can't be blown up. Stuff like that is typically the way this deck tends to go, to the point that, honestly, it might be correct to end up cutting one of Gore or Eliath as well, just based on my experience being that Wiccan is happening so little amount of the time. I do think that there is a lot to be said for this archetype, and there's probably some growth to have here. One of the things that I'm also doing is running Rocket and Groot. I don't think it's a required card, but I do think it's a pretty notable upgrade over something like Gladiator, which is what most people tend to be running in this deck. This is a card that is just there to prevent the worst case scenario, to add some additional utility, and to generally be a sort of prophylactic against our opponents who are able to clog us up with things like Polaris. Because we play so many cheap 1-drop cards, we are a little bit vulnerable to those clogs. In addition, this is another role that Hydra Bob can help in. Again, like if that's the 4th card, you can snap it out. You can end up doing some good stuff that way. Ultimately, though, what this deck wants to do is just curve out in a strong way. Final turn, Shang-Chi and Mockingbird, final turn, Thanos gets 10 power and a Mockingbird, final turn, Gore and a Mockingbird. All of that is pretty possible. So basically, pretty typical Thanos gameplay, but with more of a focus on actually curving out to the point that you are able to run Wiccan as a free roll. I think if you're looking for a budget replacement for Hydra Bob, you're probably looking in the direction of a Spider Ham. Actually, the reason is I just want a card that I am comfortable playing that is a one drop that I can curve out into. Spider Ham's a good option, Silver Sable's a good option, Iceman's a good option. A lot of different things you can do instead of Hydra Bob. Hydra Bob is in here out of deference to it's very nice to have a card that can move and clear up your locations later. And he is a 1/5, and this deck does care about curving out, and sometimes it cares a lot about priority when you're in a Goliath deck, and having stats that are greater than the stats your opponent has is a really good way to make that happen. So, Hydra Bob, pretty important part of the deck. Hardly a required piece, though. I think most people who play this deck do so without Bob, but I would recommend playing at least one additional one drop if you're going to cut him. Psylocke is awkward. A lot of the time, it's like, I almost wonder if it's supposed to be Penny Parker. Like, you're not really Psylocking into Wiccan all that much. It's just like a thing that can happen. And when you're not Psylocking into Wiccan, there's these awkward conflicting turns where you have, like, turn 4, you can do like Psylocke 2 stones, 6 drop on 5, stuff like that. But then it's like, all right, well, if one of those stones is the time stone, my Thanos already cost 5. I'm not really getting a lot out of this 6 drop on 5 thing. It's just gonna be the Thanos I was playing anyway. She's okay, but I would not be surprised if there was a way to replace her in this list at all. When I play this list, the cards that really matter are like Mockingbirds and Stones. And, Wiccan and Psylocke are cool, but far from required. In deference to this being a sort of Mockingbird-based deck, we have a 2-drop here that gives us a card that discounts Mockingbird. That is pretty explicitly the role Cable plays here. Wouldn't be shocked if we try to get Iron Patriot into here after he comes out on Tuesday. Hawkeye does pretty much the exact same thing that Cable does, except your cards that you're going to get are going to be the 2 of them, and it's going to be a lot more easy to play them because they're going to cost 1. That additional ability in the form of the acid arrow to not necessarily clog up your opponent, but to like play cards and fill in your curve and not overly clog your locations can also be helpful, even if the acid arrow isn't going to end up discounting Mockingbird. This is a card that I think is quite crucial in a list like this because not only is it stacking up cards created for Mockingbird to discount, it is also, in a decent amount of cases, stacking up on reveals that'll make your gore bigger. It's just like the best tech card in the game. There's just never a reason for me to play any deck that wants to curve out without putting Red Guardian in it. We're especially vulnerable to stuff like Dagger, Madam Web. Red Guardian is basically the thing that we can do about that. This deck just wants a pretty big 3. This is a pretty big 3. Replacements include Gladiator, Copycat, Nocturne, whatever. I think that Rocket and Groot is just like consistently a very strong card here. I have enjoyed it being a part of this deck. It's been good. It's been a very solid way of like maintaining space in a lane and allowing me to figure out on later turns of the game what I want to do. It also has a pretty pronounced effect on what your opponent is doing. Like, this is a card people are very afraid to play into, and I think that that is a really relevant and notable thing about Rocket and Groot. You get some real reads on what your opponent is going to be doing and where they're going to be doing it, and maybe they get a little bit too cloggy in one of those other lanes, and you can really get them with an acid arrow. Stuff like that does happen. This is Shang-Chi. Sheen, this is the 7th time you've shown Shang-Chi in class. Yeah, I think at this point everyone knows what Shang-Chi is, what Shang-Chi does, and why Shang-Chi's good. For those who don't, he makes big things go boom. Still a little iffy on this card in the deck. It's nice when it happens, and I think that's really what this deck is doing. Like, this deck is not built around Wiccan, to the point that I have these deep worries about Psylocke even being worth it. Wiccan is a lot easier to justify because it's a 4/7, right? So it's like, okay, worst case scenario, that's a 4/7. I'm not going to be all that mad about playing a 4/7. I like having a 4-drop I can curve out, even if I'm not getting the energy from it. Maybe I end up playing it anyway. And that is a lot easier to swallow than a 2/2 is, frankly. And so when I look at this and I look at Psylocke, Wiccan is a card that I can totally understand running just as like a function of what this deck wants to do. This deck already wants to be just using all of its energy. You might as well put Wiccan in there. Psylocke, a little bit more iffy by comparison because it's just a worse card on numbers. The guy's huge in this deck. Stones, many of them have on reveals. The cards that you get from, of course, Kate Bishop have on reveals. Kate Bishop is an on reveal. Many of the cards in this deck are on reveals. I was worried that when I put in the Hydra Bob and the Rocket and Groot in exchange for on reveals, that it would meaningfully cost my gore. It didn't. This guy's still just ridiculously huge almost all of the time. And so there are certain situations that call for different versions of your 6 drops here. And you really have 3 of them, despite the fact that there are 4 6 drops in the deck. Technically, Mockingbird is not a 6 drop. So you really have this guy, Thanos, and Alioth to choose from. Alioth is actually, I think, maybe the most cuttable of those, but it's so hard to give up the option to do that. Gore is just an impossibly large guy in the deck like this. Like, he's very often just like, this is a 6/17, and that's like the average is what it feels like. And so you end up with just a very large man. And one of the things that Alioth does is sort of invalidate specific plays. Another way to invalidate plays is just have a guy that is really big. One of these cards I feel like is cuttable. I do not know which. It's so difficult to look at Alioth and be like, I think I should take that out of my deck. Because the second you do, you run into a situation where you're like, damn, Alioth is the only card in the world that would win me this game. And I think that's part of why I don't mind Wiccan in this deck, because Wiccan is the only real way you're going to be able to play a Gore and an Alioth or in the same game, basically. It's the only time it's going to happen. And so you end up with a card that is not going to be useful in a variety of games, but is going to be extremely useful and the only card that matters in some of them. And that is a hard card to cut because, again, sometimes it's the only thing that can win you a game, especially in the worlds where you have like the ability to back it up with a big Mockingbird. But that's actually kind of the ultimate problem with Alioth is like 6/9 is not a lot of points. And this deck is not amazing at point output. And so you're very often in spots where it's like Alioth can stop them from doing points, but I might just lose if they have other stuff. And so that's what makes Alioth feel a little bit more cuttable in this list than otherwise. I feel like this is the card the deck is about. Like, if you want to play a Thanos deck, the reason is because you want consistent access to cheap Mockingbirds. This deck is the best deck in the game at getting Mockingbird super cheap and drawing her very often. Arishem does not have that option. The deck is too big to reliably draw Mockingbird. Thanos, if you start doing Thanos stuff, you're gonna have a cheap Mockingbird. It's gonna happen. And that is one of the biggest and best things a deck like this can do. Because it pairs that cheap Mockingbird with really relevant tech that covers a lot of different situations. We go back to why it was so hard to talk about cutting Alioth or Gore. Those cards plus a Mockingbird, insanely strong. Mockingbird plus the rest of the stones to turn on Power Stone for Thanos, insanely strong. There's a lot of stuff like that that can happen on the final turn of the game that makes your range very hard to really guess at, right? Let's say you have a free Mockingbird and an Alioth. That's a really good way to make up for the fact that Alioth isn't a lot of points. Like, this is a very, very powerful card, and I would argue the reason to play Thanos is Mockingbird. I will say that Thanos himself, after the Time Stone, was just, like, actually pretty damn good a lot of the time. I'm not upset to play a 5/10 that I might later buff to a 5/20 that cannot be Shang-Chi'd. I'm not overly upset about that. There are definitely matchups where that is not enough, but in a lot of sort of mid-rangey matchups, being a deck that can just be like, here's some points, also I have a 0/9, that's good enough. It just is. Like, we are not a deck that is overly invested in the late game anymore, the way other Thanos decks tended to be when we were still time stoning into Profex and like we ran like 5/5 drops and the only thing we would do in the early game is stones and all that. We have actual cards that we play in the early game, right? It's not like that version of the deck. It's not like the Lockjaw version of the deck. We can curve out and do a reasonable impression of a curve out mid-range deck. It's just that, when we Wiccan, our Wiccans are better because we have more stuff. And we also have Mockingbird. So it's like, it's almost like Not saying it's 100% like that, but it's almost like this is a deck that can compete with and big brother the mid-range decks a lot, thanks to the general discounts that it's able to create. And Thanos is a major part of that. Those stones are very good. And even his body, it ain't that bad. All right, y'all, thank you so much for taking a look at this Thanos deck tech. 69% win rate. I had a blast with this, honestly. I have not had this much success with Thanos in a very long time. I think it's a lot due to, you know, Rockin' and Groot comes out, everyone's playing mid-range stuff. Thanos is good at big brothering mid-range. Like, that's real. And I think this deck, as long as that is a thing people are doing, has a real shot to exist in the metagame, which is crazy to me. As always, I've been KM Best. You've been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one. I like stones. Aranya Hydra Bob. Weird. Don't fully grasp it. Definitely confused, yeah. Think I gotta snap this, yeah. That feels like a Shang-Chi to me. Like a little Shangers here. Who the hell knows, though, honestly. Goddamn. Woo! Scary! God damn! That was scary as hell! Unfortunately, what that means is someone else got to it before you. Okay. Remember when Eliath would just delete cards? Lol. Yeah. You know what? Ogeen. Not even gonna try to pronounce that, but thank you. Thank you for the tier 1. Look at that. Not great. Yo, Saint Padmapper with the Prime. Thank you so much. I got a PAX code and I'm no bum, so subscribe. Thanks for all you do and your YouTube. Awesome. Love to hear it. Yeah, so like really good shot at pulling gore here. Yeah. Love a free gore. I am trying to get them to rocket and Groot that acid arrow. That is my goal. Is Thanos a medical? It's just like a fun little card I wanted to play. And no Galacta? Maybe this was a snap, honestly. I think the reason it wasn't a snap is because of, like, rogue potential. Don't think I win. Ah. Nah, I lose the right. Right? Wait, no. Steal 1, win a tiebreaker? Steal 1, win a tiebreaker? Rocket and Groot! Let's fucking go. I do not know why they made the play they did. I've got like a shitload more now. There's 6, and we're gonna keep experimenting, figuring out what it is that we're trying to get to. Nice little present with last night. I thought it was the 7th night. Christmas was the first night. It's like the 7th, all right? Bro. They snapped that. They probably should. I could have... I don't know how they know I don't have redstone, but I don't, so they're fucking... They got it right. Just dead. Just dead. Just lost 2 cubes. Stupid ass game. Ow, by the way. I don't even know where to submit them. marvelsnap.com/packs. Well, goddamn. This is so risky. Holy shit. I'm goated. I'm actually goated. Holy shit, I'm goated with the sauce. I'm actually fucking goated with the sauce, chat. That's 8. The Himey Wimeys. Oh, shit. Sick. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Let's do it. Okay, so then they get 4 and 4. We are, in theory, bigger than that. Solid. Solid. We will win by just a small number on each of them. Yeah, Reality Stone, we had to play it. Like, we did. Oh, fuck. Okay. Every hand immediately gets better when you draw a stone. Prioritize Time Stone over Soul Stone for sure, in my opinion. Ooh, we got a stone. We got 2 stones. Let's go. It's gonna be fun. Worst case scenario, we can use Mockingbird to fill curve. Got to fill curve that way. Get rock-headed. I don't trust it. I don't trust that I'm not going to get Killmongered out of being able to Thanos into the vault. This would be 8 total. They would be at 7 total. I think I can win this game. I don't think I lose to a Luke Cage Hazmat, whatever else. It's especially relevant because we do know they have Killmonger. I mean, okay, which one of these lanes are we going for? There is the Hazmat, as expected, and the Killmonger hitting there works for me. We should win this game from here. No. Take a point. Jesus, that's horrifying. Take a point. Jesus, that's horrifying. Okay. We were correct. Would have been an easier win on the other lane. But, you know. We did get there. Evo is. Come on, just pull one of my guys, please. Need you to pull one of my guys, please. It's fine. I'll live. There we go. Yeah, I mean, it's this. RIP codes. We're gonna test them after. Nothing, nowhere to move, my man. Sick nasty. Sick nasty. Well, there goes our Wiccan. Who, to be fair, we just haven't played anyway. Why not? What are you? Time Stone? All right. Galacta might be... Doom and Galacta... Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to tell. Doom, Galacta, this stuff. There's a lot. I mean, that's a really scary dude. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like that's not a really scary dude. But I also don't super care all that much. Like, go ahead, take my points. I'll get them back. I'll get more out of filling that lane up than you will out of not. Big gore. Love it. I just really hope Shang-Chi is not a real card. Yeah? Wait, is that the last stone that I needed? Power Stone is on now. Do we need Power Stone? Seems pretty fun. Shang-Chi's fake, right? Shang-Chi seeming fake right now. Seeming fake right now. Hopefully fake right now. Rude. Cosmo. Looking fake. Looking pretty fake, my man. Looking like a fake card. Thanos for 20, Gore for 26.